As the High Lords play their Game of Thrones in the south, the cold winds are rising in the north. The others are once again marshaling their forces, preparing to march down upon the Seven Kingdoms to finish a fight thousands of years in the making. Every army has its leaders. Is it possible then that there is an unseen entity, a phantom menace, that stands at the head of the legions of the undead, ready to ride down upon the winds of winter to erase humanity from existence once and for all? A singular shadow that one could consider to be their commander or even their king. Some consider Night's King to be the prime candidate for this position, but if we look closely at his story, Night's King may be more of a myth than a man. Do the others have a king, or will a king join the others? Before we delve deep into the theories, please do me the honor of liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications. And now, on with the video. On the show Game of Thrones, there was a character called the Night King. He was the primary antagonist of the series, the king of the White Walkers. While there is no such character in the books, there is mention of a character called Night's King. First mentioned in A Storm of Swords, Night's King is a frightening figure that features in many of Old Nan's darker hearth tales. Though we never learn his name, we do know some of his story. Night's King was once Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He lived during the Age of Heroes, and his name is mentioned along the likes of Brandon the Builder, Land the Clever, and Garth Greenhand. It is said that he was a warrior that did not know fear and used sorcery in battle. One day, while on patrol atop the wall, he saw a woman walking through the woods with skin as pale as milk and eyes like blue stars. Because he had no fear, he chased her down, and when he caught her, he made love to her, and in doing so, he gave up his seed and his soul. He returned to the Night Fort and installed himself as king, with his corpse bride as his queen. Using magic, he bound his brothers to his will. Night's King reigned for 13 years. Many dark deeds occurred during this time. It took the combined forces of the king in the north and the king beyond the wall to end the reign of this preternatural pretender. When the dust of battle settled, it was discovered Night's King had been making sacrifices to the others. These horrendous crimes proved to be a line too far. In condemnation of his memory, his existence was stricken from record, and it became forbidden to even speak his name. The show revealed a lot of surprising moments that George R.R. Martin confirmed will appear in the last two novels. So, fans have been wondering ever since, could it be that Night's King shall return to lead the others into war in the next long night? While that makes for an interesting scenario, a quote by George R.R. Martin himself makes this theory impossible. Quote, "As for the Night's King, the form I prefer, in the books he is a legendary figure akin to Land the Clever and Brandon the Builder, and no more likely to have survived to the present day than they have." End quote. Night's King was a mortal man who has long since died. He was not an other, not their leader, nor was he their king. That he made sacrifices to the others makes him more of a supplicant and not their sovereign, which makes sense considering the story of Night's King takes place after the Long Night and the construction of the wall. The others would still be reclusive at this time of the story, having just suffered defeat. Night's King was a Lord Commander of the Watch who allegedly had sorcerous powers, abandoned his vows, and turned to the dark side, bringing his brothers with him. His story is thousands of years old with little historical record. How much of it can we be certain is true? Martin compared him to legendary characters from early in Westerosi history. Characters like Land the Clever, who is said to have stolen gold from the sun to brighten his hair, and Brandon the Builder, who is said to have built Winterfell, Storm's End, and the Wall. To again quote Martin, "No one can even say for certain if Brandon the Builder ever lived. He is as remote from the time of the novels as Noah and Gilgamesh are from our own time." End quote. To put things into perspective, the Epic of Gilgamesh was written in 2100 BC. As of this video, we are in the year 2023. That would mean the Epic of Gilgamesh was written over 4,123 years ago. Brandon the Builder Stark, Being responsible for building all of those grand structures in one lifetime is highly unlikely. Aegon the Conqueror did not live to see construction of the Red Keep completed. How can we expect one Brandon to be responsible for finishing all of those buildings? Or is it more likely we're dealing with multiple Brandons across multiple lifetimes? Or are we dealing with one Brandon using multiple Brandons across multiple lifetimes? That's a mystery for another day. The point being, with medieval technology and a very low magic system, no singular Brandon is building all of that at once. Land stealing gold from the sun is an absolute impossibility. The accomplishments of Lan and Bran are exaggerated to simply make their stories more entertaining. Could the same thing be happening with the story of Night's King? As Maester Yandel once said, quote, "Names such as Brandon the Builder, Garth Greenhand, Lan the Clever, and Durin Godsgrief are names to conjure with, but it is likely their legends hold less truth than fancy." End quote. Let's look at Night's King's story to see if we can separate what may be true from what may be false or exaggerated. It is difficult for Sam to find early histories on the Night's Watch. The information he does find is sparse or appears to be contradictory, but somehow we know that Night's King was specifically the 13th Lord Commander who ruled as a would-be king for exactly 13 years. 13 in our real world is a number some consider to be unlucky and is rife with superstition. The same is true in this world of ice and fire.
Yes. Yes. Kill for mother.
We learn this in Book 5 when Daenerys is offered 13 galleys to leave Meereen. Quote, "Zaro Zohandaxos has offered me 13 galleys," she told Irri and Jiqui as they were dressing her for court. 13 is a bad number, Khaleesi, murmured Jiqui in the Dothraki tongue. "It is known." "It is known," Irri agreed. End quote. Frequent use of the number 13 is a way of giving his character more of a cursed reputation. We learn that Maegor the Cruel ruled for exactly 6 years and 66 days. It is believed by some Christian religions the number 666 is the number of the beast and is associated with the Antichrist, a figure that is prophesied to rise to power claiming to be Jesus Christ, only to be revealed as an agent of Satan. In some versions of the tale, the Antichrist is the son of Satan. Giving Maegor this number is meant to make his bloody reign even more sinister. Associating the number 13 with Night's King is meant to have a similar effect, which is fitting considering it was said he ruled at the Night Fort, the oldest and the most sinister of all the abandoned castles along the wall. While he did hold the Night Fort for some time, I would assume the 13-year reign is part of the myth. We are told he took a blue-eyed woman with pale skin for a bride. This strongly suggests the woman was an other. This is peculiar because we have never seen nor heard of a female other. It is specifically stated in the text, Craster only gives his sons to the cold gods. His wives strongly believed these sons are somehow transformed into others, something the show has seemingly confirmed. The scene about Craster's sons appears in Book 3 following the mutiny at Craster's Keep. Quote,
"They?" said Sam, and the raven cocked its black head and echoed, They. "The boy's brothers," said the old woman on the left. "Craster's sons. The white coals rising out there, Crow. I can feel it in my bones. These poor old bones don't lie. They'll be here soon. The sons."
End quote. I believe the reason the others need to steal children is likely because there is no female caste, and they are incapable of sexual reproduction. While the others might not be female, their whites can be, since whites are reanimated remains of people. It doesn't seem possible, though, that Night's King found a female white to wed. Whites instinctively try to kill humans and all other living beings. There's no reasoning with a white. Perhaps if Night's King did wed a female white, it was a woman he had known when she was alive, a woman he loved and he could not bear to be without her. This subplot is common in the zombie genre. I find it much more likely that this so-called corpse bride was no female White Walker or white. If she did exist, she was just a woman, a living woman, but over 4,000 years, Night's King's bride went from being a woman to something else, something more sinister. And more than once in this series, a man has been ruined by his love for a woman. Jaime Lannister and Cersei Lannister, for example. Or a man has been ruined by having a corrupt woman by his side. For example, Lord Stannis Baratheon and his Red Woman, Melisandre. Perhaps Night's King was in a similar situation. If his bride was a human woman, it would have been possible for Night's King and his queen to have produced children. As Craster would do many centuries later, Night's King could have sacrificed his own son or sons to the cold gods. Upon the wall, it would be easy for Night's King to hide his bride from anyone visiting the Night Fort. It would be much harder for him to hide a squalling babe. Giving the child to the cold would be a way of hiding the evidence that he was breaking his vows. As for binding his brothers to his will, if we don't take it literally, as in he used magic to accomplish this, it is easy to believe Night's King merely convinced his men to follow him and abandon their vows. If we look at all the details of Night's King's story, it is the tale of a corrupt Lord Commander that broke each and every one of his vows. He claimed a crown, took a bride, he held the Night Fort as his own lands, and it may be that he was even in league with the others, the sworn enemy of the Watch. Is this a true story or more of a cautionary tale, a warning for future members of the Night's Watch? That his existence is written in the annals of the Night's Watch's history means he did exist, but I would wager the myth has overtaken the man. Old Nan is where we first hear of Night's King. Old Nan is an invaluable source of information on Westerosi history, but her hearth tales are meant to entertain as well as inform. If she didn't spice them with just enough elements of fantasy, she might as well be a maester giving a history lesson. Take, for example, the giants in Old Nan's stories versus the giants Jon meets in real life. Quote, "In Old Nan's stories, giants were outsized men who lived in colossal castles, fought with huge swords, and walked about in boots a boy could hide in. These were something else, more bear-like than man, and as woolly as the mammoths they rode. Seated, it was hard to say how big they truly were. They were not wearing skins, Jon realized. That's hair. Shaggy pelts covered their bodies, thick below the waist, sparser above. He looked for great swords 10 feet long, but saw only clubs. Most were just the limbs of dead trees, some still trailing shattered branches." End quote. These giants look and act nothing like they do in Old Nan's stories, nor do they eat human flesh. In fact, giants appear to be vegetarian. Old Nan is a wise woman, and I would never presume to dismiss her stories as nothing but tall tales. There is truth within them, but as Maester Luwin would say, you should not swallow them whole. As for Night's King, I don't think the character is as important to the books as the Night King was for the show. The show became more plot-driven in later seasons, and it needed a primary antagonist for the heroes to defeat, something with a physical form. In the novels, it is believed the others are led by the Great Other, a deity that exists in opposition to the Red God R'hllor. Out of all 5 published novels, there's probably not a page worth of material dedicated to the character of Night's King. If anything, the story of Night's King is merely foreshadowing, or something that will serve as parallel to future events. For example, the Rat Cook is the story of a chef at the wall who was transformed into a giant white rat that could only cannibalize its own young. This seems to parallel Walder Frey and his great brood. The rat cook broke guess right when he killed a visiting king's son, cooked the boy in a pie, and fed him to the king. Walder Frey also broke guess right when he and Roose Bolton betrayed King in the North, Robb Stark, at the Red Wedding. Walder Frey has many children and grandchildren. Now that winter is finally here, supplies will become scarce at the Twins. It's going to be difficult for Walder Frey to feed all those mouths. That is, if he himself does not die before the end. I would not be shocked that, before the end, the Freys turn on each other and eat themselves from within. Similarly, I believe another character will follow in Night's King's footsteps. He will claim a crown, hold the Night Fort, and even have a corpse queen for a companion. He will also sacrifice his own child. But that will do it for now, cause that's it. The Night King from Game of Thrones is an invention of the show, and no similar character exists in the books. Night's King was simply a man who broke his vows, but in the years since his dark reign, myths have overtaken the man he was. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, it's time to call the banners. Make sure you like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think about Night's King and his legend. Also, don't forget to ring the bell to turn on notifications, and also to let Night's King know it's time to kiss the corpse bride. Thank you to the following Patreon supporters and channel members, including Philip E. And again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.